Welcome back to the GSMC Hockey Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. We're going to get right into our second segment, talking about whether or not the Oilers can overcome a 3-0 series deficit, or if this is too tall of a task to ask of them. First off, to understand if they can, we want to look at the historical outcomes with 3-0 series in Stanley Cup Finals and in just, regular overall playoffs here. For the Stanley Cup Finals, it has happened one time before. In the 1942 Stanley Cup Final. That was between the Toronto Maple Leafs and the Detroit Red Wings. This is the only time it's happened in the Stanley Cup Final, as I said. So it's happened before, and historically, you can do it. It happened in 1942. That was 84, or I don't know if I did that math correct. 88 years ago, somewhere around there. It was a very long time ago. 82? Yes, 82 years ago. I know how to do math. But there has been times that it has happened elsewhere in the playoffs. It has happened 4 times in total in the NHL Stanley Cup playoffs. It has happened between the New York Islanders and the Pittsburgh Penguins in the 1975 Stanley Cup quarterfinals, which was the second round, I believe. This was the year that the New York Islanders won 8 games facing elimination. Very impressive what they were able to do. Of course, this is the Islanders team with, I believe it had Mike Bossy on it. I believe it had, what's his name? Oh, that's going to annoy me. I'll get back to you. He became a Flyer later in his career. Oh, I can't believe I just blanked on that name. That is a Hall of Famer. But for the New York Islanders in 1975, fantastic team that they were able to take a reverse sweep against the Pittsburgh Penguins. In 2010, it has happened. So it has happened in this, millennium. The Philadelphia Flyers did it on the Boston Bruins in 2010. This, of course, was on the Philadelphia Flyers' way to play in the Stanley Cup Finals, where they would eventually lose to the Chicago Blackhawks in that Stanley Cup Finals. We all know that goal that only Patrick Kane saw go in 2010 to win the Chicago Blackhawks that Stanley Cup Final. And then in 2014, it happened on the Los Angeles Kings over the San Jose Sharks. On the Los Angeles Kings' way to winning that Stanley Cup Final in 2014, their second in 3 years in 2012 and 2014, of course, for the Los Angeles Kings. So for this Edmonton Oilers team, yes, it has happened, and it actually has happened recently. It's happened twice in this, twice in the last 14 years. But can this Edmonton Oilers team do it is really the question we need to be asking. And for this Edmonton Oilers team, I do believe that they do have some things that go in their favor when it comes to this season. First off, this team is a very streaky team. We saw this in the regular season where they had a horrific start to the season, going 9-18-2, I believe, to open up the season. Of course, firing their head coach. And then they change coaches. They win 16 games in a row from December to January. 16 games in a row. This team is a streaky team, and this team knows how to go on win streaks, and this team is able to do, of course, is able to go on win streaks. But against the Florida Panthers, it's a very, very tall task, and that's what I would be worried about if I were to be this Edmonton Oilers team, or if I were to be an Edmonton Oilers fan. This Florida Panthers team doesn't give anything. You need to take everything that you want against this team. We saw this against the New York Rangers, who are a fantastic team. We saw this against the Boston Bruins, who made the Maple Leafs look kind of, silly in that Game 7 and in that first round. And then, of course, we saw it against the Tampa Bay Lightning team, who just won 2 Stanley Cup Finals not too long ago. This Florida Panthers team is really, really good, and they absolutely deserve to be where they're at in this playoffs. Beating the Tampa Bay Lightning in 5 games, beating the Boston Bruins in 6 games, beating the New York Rangers in 6 games, and now having a 3-0 series lead on the Stanley Cup Finals. This team is just that good. This team is a fantastic team. But on the other side, when you're looking at this Edmonton Oilers team, it's not a bad team. They just need to put it together, and their superstars need to start producing. This is what we were going to talk about in segment 1. Held it off here a little bit for the segment 2. Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl, Evan Bouchard, Vander Kane, Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, Dylan Holloway. These players haven't scored a goal yet in this Stanley Cup Finals. The Edmonton Oilers have scored 4 goals this entire Stanley Cup Finals. It's Philip Broberg, Matthias Ekholm, Ryan McLeod, and Warren Foegele are your 4 goal scorers. Darnell Nurse hasn't scored a goal. Connor McDavid, of course, assisted on 3 of these goals. There was only 1 goal this Stanley Cup Final that Connor McDavid hasn't had a contribution on. But that's not just enough. Their superstars need a score, and they need to figure it out. You pay these guys so much money not to ghost in the most important games. You need to get production from Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl especially. This team is a completely different team when Leon Draisaitl is producing. We see it all the time. I saw this in the Dallas Stars series. They lost the games that Leon Draisaitl didn't play well, and they won the games where Leon Draisaitl did play well. Leon Draisaitl hasn't had a point yet in the Stanley Cup Finals, and you know that's wearing on him, and you know he's working on that. And this won't last, and I truly believe he's going to have a great Game 4. But he needs to. He needs to start showing up for this Edmonton Oilers team. But he could be the difference. If Leon Draisaitl is producing at the levels Leon Draisaitl, of course, historically produces that, they win that Game 3. Truly, they win that Game 3. They are more competitive in that Game 1, which, just a few chances escaped them, and they really could have. The thing with Leon Draisaitl is he's getting chances in this Stanley Cup Finals. In that Game 3, he had, I think, 3 high percentage scoring chances on a power play where he just missed the net on shots that were cross-crease feeds from Connor McDavid, who found him brilliantly. Leon Draisaitl needs to figure it out. He needs to start producing for this Edmonton Oilers team, or they're not going to go anywhere. Or they're not going to, win a game here. If you have that production from Leon Draisaitl, that's a completely different team. Evan Bouchard, he only has 1 point in these playoffs. He is a point per game in the playoffs or leading up to the Stanley Cup Finals, and he hasn't been able to produce in the Stanley Cup Final. You also have Zach Hyman, who he might still be the leading goal scorer in these playoffs with 14. Not a single goal. I don't even think I named him when I was naming the forwards that haven't played well yet. He hasn't gotten a single point, or, screw point, because he doesn't get assists normally. He hasn't gotten a goal. This 50-goal scorer hasn't scored in the Stanley Cup Final, and of course that's not because of him. It's because Gustav Forsling is completely taking him out of the game, and that's completely fair. For the Florida Panthers, they're not letting the superstars of Edmonton beat them. They have a very great game plan to beat this Edmonton Oilers team. They really are just... If Matthias Ekholm beats us, Matthias Ekholm beats us. And we do have a comment from Mark Deitz. Oilers have been a victim of their high draft picks for years. No team built behind them, and the top players get worn out. And you are completely correct, Mark. We saw this with the mid-2010s Oilers when they had so much talent. Of course, Nugent Hopkins, Taylor Hall, when Connor McDavid was first starting out, Nail Yakupov. You have this talent, but the goaltender is awful, and the defense is awful. And, you're looking down the list, and you have these 5 great guys on offense, and you can score goals with them, but you're giving up so many. And this has been, as you said, Mark, to go with your comment here, it's really true. They just haven't built... See, what I look on paper when I look at the Florida Panthers roster, they have Vladimir Tarasenko on a third line. That is what a Stanley Cup Final and what a Stanley Cup champion roster is, right? Or, an Oliver Ekman-Larsson on the third line defensive pairing. The depth pieces being able to produce, but not just be able to produce. You can put them out there on the ice and have faith that they'll get a positive production from them. The Edmonton Oilers don't have this, and to your point there, they need depth. They need depth in their defense because Cody Ceci is a nightmare. like truly, he just doesn't look like he is up to par with everybody else in this Stanley Cup Finals. Darnell Nurse is not worth his contract. Truly, $9.25 million for that guy is not looking good for the Edmonton Oilers. And then Evan Bouchard and Matthias Ekholm have not been playing great defensively for this Edmonton Oilers team. They're not getting great production from the defense. And, for the Edmonton Oilers, one, they need to figure it out quick because they are one game away from losing what is potentially the greatest chance that Connor McDavid can get at a Stanley Cup in his career, because you don't know if you're going to be able to come back to this spot. We call it the most difficult trophy to win in all of sports for a reason. It is so difficult to make a Stanley Cup Final, and it's so difficult to win a Stanley Cup Final. You don't know if you'll ever see him back here again, and there's a chance that we don't. As a comment from Mark, the management just said, okay, go get them, guys, referring to the top guys, and they never had the brains to trade one for a top-notch goalie, and completely agree with you. If we're looking at this series, and if you just flip the goaltenders, I think Edmonton Oilers win this series. You can clearly see the talent gap between Sergei Bobrovsky and Stuart Skinner in this game, and they tried in free agency. They tried to get Jack Campbell, but truly, one season of Jack Campbell proved his worth one season in his entire career. And even last year, he wasn't great for the Toronto Maple Leafs, his contract year. And then the Edmonton Oilers said, this is our guy, and he's not playing for the team right now. Unfortunate he is not, but still, I don't think he makes a difference in this series either. The Edmonton Oilers are one game away from a defeat in the Stanley Cup Final for good reason. And they really do need to figure it out. Their top guys need to start scoring, and they need to figure it out. But the Florida Panthers have a fantastic game plan. So can the Oilers overcome a 3-0 deficit? I'll answer the question that's on the screen right now. Truly, I don't believe they can. They are a streaky team, so if they have anything going for it, it is that they won 16 games in a row, and we see that they can go on these win streaks. But against this Florida Panthers team, I think it's too tall of a task, especially when you have to play back in Sunrise, Florida for 2 times. I don't think you're going to be able to beat them twice in Sunrise and 4 times in a row overall. So I would say that this series is done. Of course, if they start getting production out of Leon Draisaitl consistently, it could look a lot differently for the Edmonton Oilers. But that'll wrap it up for our second segment of the night on the GSMC Hockey Podcast. When I come back, we will be talking about Laine, Nietzsche, and Nikolai Ehlers seeking trades and what that looks like for those teams going forward.